All right, it's time to get started. Hello and welcome to today's presentation, which is a beginner's workshop, building a data-driven master detail mobile app. Hi, I'm Dave McCormick from Alpha Software, and I'm joined here today by our solution engineer, Chris Martin. Dion, who often takes the Wednesday spot, is on vacation, and he will be back with us 2 weeks from today. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to basically bring you through an example of building out an application. Today's application will be very simple. It's going to be a mobile application, which will basically present you with a master detail list. It's a fairly simple application, but it will show you the basic building blocks and concepts before that. So we have Chris here actually clicking on it here. When we go back, we'll show this to you. And so this week we're going to show you how to build this. Basically what you're doing is we're taking a look at a list. It's pulling data from the Northwind database, displaying it here in a UX control. When you click on a particular item, it gives you more details about that record, in this case the customer records. Next week we're going to be taking what we built here this week, and we're going to be doing something a little bit more ambitious. We're going to be working with the data in an offline capability. We're going to publish the data. We're going to get it up onto an actual Android device, which we'll show you on the screen. The same principles apply to iPhone. We're just going to do Android this time around. And we'll be using PhoneGap. But this one is the beginner session, so we're going to just take you through it step by step. So let's begin. Chris, let me take you off mute. Hello, Chris, are you there?
Hey, Dave, can you hear me?
I sure can. So why don't you, I can hear you now. Can you take us through the building of this application? And
sure. I'm gonna close out. I'm gonna open Alpha Anywhere fresh here, and I'll save the changes.
All right.
Change anything? Good. So I'm gonna open up a new session of Alpha Anywhere, and I'm gonna create a new empty workspace. We'll put it in this folder here, and I'm going to create a brand new folder for this. I'm going to be really creative and call this Demo 4.
So I know many of the people here are not new to Alpha Anywhere, but we do have a few newbies to Alpha, and let me just talk you through what Chris is doing there. It's creating a new workspace. A workspace is like a project in Alpha Anywhere. It's where you keep all of your files organized as you're building your application. And when you build a workspace, you typically create a brand new folder on your hard drive, which Chris has just done, and place the file, the demo, in this case demo4.adb file, into that folder. Once you've created that, we're here at the Web Projects control panel. So carry on.
Okay. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new object here. It's going to be a web component object.
Mm-hmm.
Next, I want a UX control, which is like previous versions was the dialogue, they used to call this.
Right.
This is before me. Next, I'm going to start with a blank UX component.
Okay.
Okay, so this is pretty much simple. I'm just getting everything laid out and started here. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select mobile because I want this to be a mobile application, and if I don't do it now, I will definitely forget afterwards. So I'm going to click that as my very first thing, and I'm also going to save my demo. Not Dino. Demo. Save. Okay, the past few Wednesday sessions, Dion did several sessions on containers and panels, and that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to start laying out my mobile application here by adding some panels. We're going to start with a Navigator panel. And Dave, if you want to
sure.
explain as I'm adding these on here.
Yep, I sure will. So in the application that you saw at the beginning, if you remember, there was a list and then there were details about what you saw. The first list is contained in what's we call a panel card. It's basically like a form or a screen for your application. And the details will be contained in a second panel card. So what Chris is doing is he's gone down to the panel section and he's added panel card 1 and panel card 2 into our UX control. Panel card 1 is where we'll put the list, and panel card 2 is where we'll put the details.
You probably want to name these differently once you create an application that's, or any actual application. This is just a demo. You probably want to give it better names like master and detail for it, but we're just going to keep them as panel card 1 and panel card 2 for now. The next thing I want to add to my panel cards is under containers. If I select container, I want to have a header, and that's where you saw the master and the detail with the button on the top, the back button. It was in the header, so I'm going to insert a header here.
So that's the header for the first panel card, and now you'll do a header for the second panel card.
Okay. Now, our first panel header had basically very simple, just a static text, which I'm going to insert right now. Call this master. So that's a text that will appear in the header. I'm going to click on my other panel header here, and I'm going to add on this one the button that you saw. Let me zoom this in. A tab stop to give some space between the button and then again another static text. This static text I'm going to call the detail. And then on the button I'm going to call this back. I'm going to come back to this button a little bit later on, but I'm going to, before I go any further, I'm going to save my changes here. Now I'm going to spend a lot of time in this particular object here. I'm going to now add a list. Control. I'm going to just keep the default name, list, and say OK. After I've created that list, I can either double-click it here, or I can also click List Properties over here to open up this next screen. And I'm going to choose SQL because I'm going to attach to it using SQL commands, SQL database. I'm going to first create my connection string. I'm going to connect to a local access database. You will be able to find that in either your program files, x86, or program files, depending on how you're set up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go to A5 V12 since I know that's where it is. And in that folder, you will find an MDB files folder right here.
Yep.
If you double-click on that, you will see the Northwind database and the Alpha Sports database. Today we're going to use the Northwind database. So I'm going to click on that and say Open. And say OK. Now that I'm connected to that database, I can now see a list of the tables. So I'm going to double-click on table name here, or you can click this button over here. It's a little easier to double-click over here. So the table name I want is going to be customers. I want to get a list of fields that I want to display from customers. So I'm going to select the company name, contact, title, address, city. Just going to select a few things to display here and click OK. Last thing I want to do on this screen is I want to change the return value type to use the primary key, and the primary key is the customer ID.
So just in short, what that does, that little setting, or it sounds very technical, but what it means is that when you click on a particular record in that first list, what it's going to return is the primary key value of that record. So let's say we scroll down to John Smith in our customer database, and let's say John Smith's customer ID was 123. When you click on it, that control is now going to know that primary key as 123. And we're going to need that information later on when we display details about him. We're going to need to be able to look him up. And so that's the reason why we have to set that primary key, so that the list will get set based on what you choose.
Okay, next, we're not going to do anything in this tab, but the next tab is Fields tab. And in this tab, you can just decide how you want your data to display. Either styles, you want bold font, change the font. So there's some different things you can do here directly on each of the individual fields, so you can have them each look a little bit different. But I'm going to switch next to the list properties. And the list properties, I want to say that this has the detailed view. As you can see, that's the first selection here, detailed view. I'm going to check that. And after I check that, that gives me another tab called Detail View. I'm not ready to click on it yet. I just want to do one more thing before I go there. I want to go down to this layout type here. And right now it's set to column, but I want to change that to be a free form. Now I can click on the Detail View. In the Detail View field map, I'm going to select that. Down at the bottom here, you'll see where it says Create New UX Controls for All Unmapped Fields. Well, I don't have any fields selected yet, but Alpha gives me create them for me. So I'm going to click on this, and basically it goes in and creates controls for that. I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to tell it where I want to place it. And where I want to place it is on panel card 2. And I want to place it after the ending tag of the header. So after it's selected, I'm going to say OK. Now, if this is your first time, this may be unchecked. So I'm going to show you what you see here where it's unchecked. I'm going to say, check this now. I want to have it in a frame. By default, it would be default. So, and I don't want to have a label on it. So I'm going to click OK. And as you see over here, it just created all those controls for me. Next, I want to click on List Layout, and this is how I want the panel card 1 to display the list of data. So I'm going to click on Predefined Templates down at the bottom here. And I'm going to select a very simple level 1 template here. Click OK. And the data I want to display is going to be the contact name. So I select the contact name, I can click OK. And as you can see, the HTML has been created for me with the insertion of the contact name field right here. One last thing I want to do before closing this out is I want to go back to list properties. And I want to do an on-click event because we need some way of telling when I click the list to tell it to, okay, I want to go select this record and show the detail of that record. So I'm going to create a on-click event here. Up on the top here, I'm going to do an action JavaScript, create added action JavaScript. I'm going to add a new action, the first button, and I'm going to give it a name. We'll call it Show Detail. OK. And new action has been created. Click OK. Now I want to edit this action. And this brings up our action JavaScript where it will actually write the JavaScript code by just selecting which actions we want to do. So I'm going to say add new action. I'm going to do a search for UX. To filter the list down a little, I am going to populate controls in an unbound UX component with data from the table.
Well, that's a very complicated explanation of what populate control. It's just one of the longer actions. But what it means basically is that you want to take this UX control. We didn't tell it when we were building it what table we wanted to connect to. We did tell the list what table we wanted to connect to, but we didn't tell the whole control. So that's why this is considered to be an unbound UX component. It's not connected to any database. So what this command does that Chris has just selected is it will take data basically from the database and put it into those controls. And Chris will just go ahead and click OK on that. They've already been mapped previously, but we have to tell it to do that. Otherwise, you would show up to this page, and none of the fields would be filled in.
Okay, the next thing I want to do is I'm going to make one setting here. I'm going to change this method for specifying the primary key to be read from dialog controls. I'm going to do a connection string here. Again, I'm going to go connect to that same Access Northwind database. I'm going to populate from the table name. I want to populate from is the customers again. And the primary key I want to set. Now, by default, this usually is small enough to select what it knows to be the primary key. So this is already checked. If it wasn't checked, you get that check it here. ID is the primary key. And click OK. The next thing I want to do is controls to read the primary key value from. I'm going to select that. And that's going to be list 1, the list that we created that has all those all the data. And click OK. Then click OK again. I can put a comment, but I'm not going to here. So that's our first thing we need to do is actually go populate the data after we select an item. The next thing I wanted to do is add another action here, and this is going to be a panel action. So I'm going to click on panel action, and I'm going to do set the active panel. That active panel, it will automatically, automatically come up and give a list of options that you can select on, and this is going to be panel card 2. Click OK. Again, I'm not going to put a description. So we're pretty much done here. Click Save. OK. And one last thing I want to do is run a JavaScript action. So this is going to create the JavaScript code that I need to show this detail when I click on an item. Just click OK, and as you can see, it wrote the JavaScript for me. I could have done this by hand, but Alpha will do it for you. And click OK. All right, we're pretty much done here for now. I'm going to click OK. Next thing I want to do is on the list, I want it to fill the container. The entire container, because this is all we're going to have below the header is going to be this list. So I'm going to click on Fill Container, and I'm going to save all this that I've done so far. Once we've, and layout errors, you see what they are. I have a layout error. Did I put something in the wrong place?
Oh, take a look at the top right where it says layout errors.
Yes.
If you click on that, it'll tell
Actually,
you.
I see it right now. I actually put it outside the panel card, the list 1, so I'm going to move that up. And there we go. It's gone. So I basically, instead of putting it at the header,
can you just zoom in on those buttons real quick, because there's a lot of really good stuff here in that button header. Those near those buttons that you just clicked to move it around.
Oh, okay.
Just to show people what happens when you put things in the wrong place, how you fix that. So basically, you can click on it. You can click on multiples as well. And there's an up button, a down button, a go to the top, go to the bottom. Of course, there's also delete as well if you've made a big mistake.
Yes, and you can actually also move to a particular position. So if you click on this, it will give you a list.
So you don't have to click up or down a million times. You could say, go right here.
Go right here and put it there. Cancel that because I just want to leave it there. So that's why I had that little error message up here, and I'll put it out of position again just to get that message up there. It says list layout errors, and if I click on that, you can see it says if a UX uses panels, all controls on the UX must be inside the panel card. So that was my hint of what I did wrong, but I actually...
So the list control was what was not where it should be. Yeah.
Yes, so I'm going to move that back up.
Got it.
And there we go. Save this. And that's actually when I hit save that let me know that there were some issues. So on panel card 2, I'm going to need a way to get back to this panel. So I'm going to click on my back button here. And over here, you can see I have a JavaScript touch mouse pointer event. So I'm going to click on this button to open up the click event. And I'm going to add, again, a panel action. Very similar to the other one, except this is going to be set active panel 2 back to panel card 1 and say OK. OK. And save. Alrighty, just so I'm going to show it like this, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to do a little bit of formatting to make it a little prettier. So I'm going to save what we have so far and see how our working preview looks up to this point. And as you can see, it looks just like the other existing one that we showed in the beginning. I'm going to click on one of the names. The difference is here that this isn't filling up the entire space.
Fill the whole panel, right?
Yeah, it doesn't fill the whole panel. So I'm going to click back. As you can see, the rest of it is working. So this was the code that I added to when I select an object, it sets up the, when I click on this, it sets up the detail page with the correct data, and the next step that it does is it goes to that page. So I'm going to click back. I'm going to go back to design mode, and I'm going to make some modifications here. First I want to make sure that my frame fills 100% of my screen, so I'm going to set that to 100% width, and click OK. I also want my fields to use the entire width of the frame, so I'm going to set that to 100%.
And can you show how to copy and paste properties?
Sure, yeah, I'm going to...
Right, so let's say Chris has done the first one, but all the other fields you'd have to send to 100%. And that won't take too long, but if you had like 50 fields, it could take a while.
So I'm going to click right up here. You see this little eyedropper, and I'm going to click on that, and that allows me to select the other components. Now, it's only going to be the one you have highlighted.
Right.
The property that you have highlighted over here.
Right, so you have to do each property separately. So if you had done width, but you had also done height, you'd first have to do width and height. You can't do them all together. But this will still let you do multiple fields at the same time.
So what I did is I'm selecting multiples here by using a shift-click mouse. I could also use a select one at a time. And I'm going to set the properties. Now there's one other property that I want to set also for now, because I just want to display, say I just wanted to display the fields, I didn't want to display any text. So I'm going to, just for giggles, I'm going to turn the text off for now and say I don't want to show any text.
So the labels will disappear.
The labels will disappear. Right. So I'm going to also want that to be done on the rest of these fields. So I'm going to click on the eyedropper again. As you can see, my previous ones are already selected. So it's not so bad. You don't have to do all those steps each time. Once you pick all the components that you want to make a change to, and if you have to do multiple properties in on a particular component, you only have to set which ones you want to change once, and then you can just say set properties. So I'm going to click Save and do a working preview. And now you can see it fills up the rest of the screen and takes away the headers. I'm going to go put it back because I want the headers actually to be in there, because next week's demo we're going to be using this same project here to edit the data, so I want to know which fields I'm editing. So I'm going to put the headers back in to above, put the eyedropper. As you can see, it's still already set. Say set properties, save, then do a working preview. Thomas Hardy, and there we go. Now the headers are back in there. And that's pretty much it. This is very, very simple. Like I said, we're going to have a lot more. We're going to actually be connecting, instead to an Access database, we're going to connect to a GoDaddy MySQL database. We're going to connect to Zebra Host, where we're going to publish our application, and I'm going to publish it then through PhoneGap to my own personal Android phone, and I will mirror that phone on the screen so you can see it's editing data. I'm going to put it into airplane mode so it will actually be offline, edit data, and then get things synced up. So next week's demo is going to be pretty extensive, getting into more detail on how to make a disconnected mobile application.
Excellent. So we have a couple questions. But before we get into them, I think we have this project posted at GitHub. Is that right, Chris?
Yes, we do.
Great. Would you mind popping over to GitHub? So if you guys want to grab this project and play with it yourself before next week, when we show you how to publish it, connect to remote databases, and do some more advanced stuff, we'll just show you where it is. So basically, if you go to GitHub, that's the problem with doing demos. You forget stuff. Anyway, it's github.com/alpha anywhere. We'll take you there. You can also go to GitHub's site and do a search for Alpha Anywhere. But it's
actually, I gotta sign in. So maybe there we go.
All right.
I'm all ready to sign in.
Mm-hmm. Do you need to sign in though to download? I don't think you do.
No, you don't.
Because we have it open. So it's github.com/alpha anywhere. All one word should be able to take you there.
It's been a while since I've been here. There we go.
So the one that you're interested in is Master Detail View. So if you go to github.com/alphaanywhere, click on that Master Detail View, you'll see over on the right a Download Zip button.
You'll also see a tiny little picture of my wedding.
Oh, wedding picture, yeah.
My wedding picture. But you also have right over here is a download zip.
Excellent.
And if you click on download zip, you will see you can now save this anywhere on your computer and then open it up in Alpha Anywhere.
Cool.
You want me to actually do it or just...
I think that should be good enough. Most people will be able to save that. Just make sure when you save it, sometimes when you go into Windows Explorer, I found, and you double-click on a zip file, it looks like it's unzipped it because you could see all the files inside of it. But in fact, often you're just taking a look inside that zipped copy. If you try to open it inside that zip copy, it doesn't work. So make sure when you download it to Windows Explorer, you right-click and you choose Extract All, or you might have some issues there. Great. Well, thanks a lot with that. Couple other questions we have here. One person asks if there are any drawbacks with prototyping an application using Access MDB and then moving it to a true SQL database later, like a MySQL or a SQL Server. Nope, there's no problem with that at all. In fact, we do that all the time. Sometimes it's just more convenient to use an Access database because the whole database driver system is built in with Alpha Anywhere anyway, and moving it is just simply a matter of using connection strings. But actually, Chris, if we could go back and show how that connection string was defined, let's show people the right way to do it so that it's portable, so that you can easily change from one thing to the other. Now you have two things that were connected, but let's just take a look at the list. The list properties, if you double-click on that, Chris has it set up as an Access database. And you see if it says connection string right there. So go ahead and click on that. And what we'd want to do, this is sort of an ad hoc thing that he created because we know about how to handle Access databases very easily. We just make this shortcut way. But this is what I would do instead if I was thinking that I'm going to start with Access, but I might move to a different database later. Instead, you could just go up, Chris, and choose Use a Named Connection String. And then, whoops, looks like we have to create one first. So go ahead and close out of that. Yeah, close that. And I think the best way to show this is if you go up into, when you're on the Web Projects control panel, if you go up to the Tools menu, and you choose Alpha DAO Connection Strings. So go ahead and click on that. So go ahead and click New. And you're going to call it, My Connection or something like that. Northwind, that's good.
Northwind.
Northwind, yeah. Choose Build, great. And we have Access selected as our connection type. But go ahead and show that drop-down. Now here we could choose anything. We could choose SQL Server, we could choose MySQL. You can even use Excel as a data source. You can use Postgres, a bunch of others as well. But we're going to choose Access in this case. So go ahead and just make that selection and choose the file name. And there's Northwind. Great. And OK. Or, sorry, test connection.
Right. Test my connection, make sure everything's good.
That's always a good thing to do. Yep.
Okay. Okay.
And close. Now if we go back to the UX Builder, and I think you've got it open. Yep. We double-click on the list. Where it says connection string, we're going to use the named connection string that we just built. We'll call it Northwind. Right.
And as you can see, this button is now enabled, which it wasn't before because there were none to select from.
Right. And there's your connection string, right? So as long as we're using, go ahead and click OK. So now the list is taking its data from, see where it says name Northwind. So as long as you're using this convention, whenever you are defining connections to your fields, to your lists, whatever, use a named connection string. Because what that will let you do later on well, two things. One is it will let you simply go in and edit the connection string later, and you'll make a change just in one place. Say, okay, now I'm pointing at SQL Server, or now I'm pointing at Oracle. I'm not pointing at Access anymore. You don't have to make any changes to your application whatsoever. You just have to change the connection string, which takes about a minute. So that was really what I would suggest doing. The other thing, we won't cover this today, but when you publish, you can actually say, okay, this connection string Northwind locally needs to be to this database here on my personal computer where I'm developing this. But when I publish it, I want you Alpha Anywhere, to automatically change it to point to a different database, my production database, because let's say you're putting it up in your production environment. That's why it's very good to use these name connection strings. They're very, very handy. The other thing to note, and this is happening behind the scenes, you really can't see it, but is that we use our own sort of SQL called portable SQL. So when you're defining queries and things like that, and in this case he just chose a table, so the underlying SQL statement would have been something like select from customers, company name, contact title, address, city, postal code, phone, whatever. That's sort of Alpha Anywhere's SQL query language. Each SQL language is a little different from the others. So MySQL is very similar to SQL Server, but it's not exactly the same. And Oracle is also a little bit different. Access is a little bit different. But what we do is we have our own flavor we call portable SQL. So when you switch from MySQL to SQL Server, Alpha Anywhere knows the syntax of both of those languages, SQL languages, or dialects, if you will, so that when you move from one to the other, you don't have to do any recoding of your SQL statements. That's all handled, and it happens behind the scenes. So it's sort of this cool little feature that took a lot of work to build, and it's one of those things that no one actually can directly see. But the great thing is it lets you move to different data source really, really easily without doing a whole bunch of recoding, which is typically what can happen. Let me see what else we've got here. We have a question about panel navigators. Let's cover this one next time, but I would like to, but I'm just going to list out the question anyway, which is that a panel navigator can move horizontally, which is left to right and right to left, or vertically, top to bottom, bottom to top. But can there be a combination of the two? Can I sometimes swipe up and sometimes swipe left or something like that? I believe it is possible to embed panel navigators within each other to handle that. But I'd like to come up with a example ourselves that we can show off on that. So we'll work on that for next time, and we will have an example of that ready. But yes, you absolutely can do sorts of more sophisticated swiping. You can also have portions of the screen which swipe up and down, and other portions of the screen which swipe left and right. But we'll handle that in a different session.
And Dave, actually, next week's demo, I will be pointing to a MySQL database, and basically the MySQL database, I made a copy of the Northwind Access database. Some of the fields are a little different, like the images and things won't show up. But however, I'm not using those particular components fields right now.
Mm-hmm.
I should be able to change and point, instead of the Access database, point to my GoDaddy MySQL database, and everything should still hook up pretty easily.
Okay.
I think it might just automatically happen pretty easily. So that will be part of next week's demo.
Okay, great. So you have 3 people who've written in to say, hey, the sound today there's something wrong with it. I don't know what you're getting, Chris, on your side. Am I breaking up, or does it sound all right to you?
Yeah, you're breaking up quite a bit a little while ago. I sent a little text message saying
I didn't see that. Sorry about that, guys. It is recorded on my end, so when you go take a look at videos.alphasoftware.com, you see the recording. You can actually hear what I say. It won't be broken up on the recording. I apologize for that. We'll take a look at that with the GoToWebinar people who I need to talk to today. Another question we've got, can I use a drop-down to limit what you can see in the list? So the answer is yes, you can do that. Let's prepare an example for you for next time that shows you how to do that using Action JavaScript. We can put in a filter and let you say, take a look just at maybe people by country or something like that. So
we may have to split this up into 2 sessions, or
looks like we've got a couple sessions, or we might be able to do an additional day next week before Dion makes it back.
Or I don't know, is it possible can we do a longer session if we run a little long? Or
guys, what do you think? Go ahead and type your comments in. Would you be okay if we had to do a longer session one of these times? We'll let them know. It's always recordable anyway, so you can always go back that way.
Because we're going to be covering a lot of things next week.
Yeah, it might be a bit. So let's see, is there anything else though that we can get to this week, or we're going to sort of end here with a short session? Looks like we're going to end with a shorter session. Oh, good. You guys are good with longer sessions. Okay, awesome. Great. So anyway, thank you for joining us on basically our first workshop to this group. We will have a much longer, more detailed presentation for next week. In the meantime, if you have questions, besides the 2 that we're talking about, the example with the filter, and the other example that we had with left to right and top to bottom embedded swiping, you can just send your questions off to guides, G-U-I-D-E-S, at alphasoftware.com, and I will make sure that they get answered. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, Chris, for presenting. We hope to see you next week. Take care, and goodbye.